Techsauce Global, sparking innovative thoughts. The Near Future Podcast in partnership with Techsauce and SDGX.
Welcome to the SDGX Techsauce podcast. We are back again, really discussing about what's going to be happening in the near future with respect to as far as founders, entrepreneurship, innovation, investors. And today's session, we've got a good friend of mine coming on, Andy, and we're going to have a really interesting discussion. There is a real hunt for talent. Talent is one of the most valuable resources a startup can have, an investor searches for, and it really supports the mission of going forward, expanding, scaling, all these things. But I'll hand over to Andy to introduce herself and to tell us a little bit, Andy, about sort of what you're doing now, but how you got there.
Thanks, David, and so wonderful to catch up with you and the Techsauce team. So a little bit of background about how I got here is I spent the last two decades working with high-performing leaders and executives from early stage startups to corporates around the world. And in fact, I spent the last 6 years in the startup ecosystem as an early stage investor, scouting the top entrepreneurial talent around the world to invest in. And so as I was scouting all of these early stage founders, I was using a data-driven tool called Fingerprint for success. And so in my discovery, working with these high-performing entrepreneurs, I got to really learn the key motivations of what makes them successful and unsuccessful. You can call me a data geek. I'm absolutely obsessed with data, with entrepreneurs, with startups, with technology and innovation. So I've been really lucky. I've spent running over 300 sort of pitch competition events in which you have been involved in also, and looking for these talent. I really, really deeply got to understand some of the inhibitors of what holds entrepreneurs back, and I got to see the ones that were able to have multiple exits or multiple successes. What were those motivations, and what's the environment that sort of best sets them up? So I actually have joined one of my portfolio companies, Fingerprint for Success, after spending years as an early stage investor and running all of these events and incubators and 22 accelerators that I now help full-time help teams grow and scale their leadership.
I mean, I've got this question. I've got two questions. I've got one question, and it's really around entrepreneurship, not founders. But I mean, can entrepreneurs be created, or are they just sort of born with the skills of being an entrepreneur? But at the same time, I've got a bit of insight into Fingerprint for Success, and you're really not looking. It's not a psychological test in a normal sense. Anything else? You're looking for behaviors and how behaviors match with other behaviors, and these types of things. So let me go back to the first question then. Can entrepreneurs be created? Can you train an entrepreneur, or is that a skill that you're sort of born with?
It's an excellent question, David. And so I'll share a little bit of history just to answer that question. So Fingerprint for Success, the founder and CEO, Michelle Duval, I actually came to know her through my two other co-founders. She was their coach. She's one of the pioneers in coaching psychology and development. And she led a 20-year groundbreaking longitudinal study of successful founders and founders who actually failed in their ventures. And so running this 20-year, looking at all the statistical correlations of cognitive behaviors, or what we call the cognitive sciences, looking at these behaviors and traits of these entrepreneurs, we were able to benchmark and study, wow, the ones that had exited between 6 million and 1.2 billion had these 10 top behaviors in terms of being able to have those multiple successes and being able to look at all of the factors that correlate to venture failures as well. And so based on this benchmark, we were able to immediately look at the tool. There's a simple survey, it takes 10 minutes to do. So we'll look at 48 different motivations of how you like to work when you're at work. And based on this simple tool and based on the study that we did, looking at the gaps. So the first question, yes, there are entrepreneurs that are born with those sort of behaviors and their traits naturally. And we're also, in the 6 years that I've been running accelerator programs, entrepreneurs can also be created if three things. If you, depends on their support structure. So what do they, and what I mean by that is what is the awareness that they have, depends on what the gap is, and what we've been able to help entrepreneurs when they know what the gap is. And then the second part is then having the discipline to change, and once they have that awareness on the gap. And so having a coach that's able to reflect what that gap is. So we've been very lucky. We've helped companies. I don't know if you've ever heard of an Australian tech, what they call a decacorn now, called Canva. Recently they hit 15 billion in valuation, and a big goal was to hit 500 million in revenue. So they've been a great case study for us, helping these founders and leaders scale themselves, scale the other leaders in the business, and scale the entire company and scale the culture to kind of continually evolve and grow based on these gaps and benchmarking against this 20-year study that we've been doing.
Well, yeah, but to take it then further then, because you and I have both been on the startup side, on the founder side, you and I have both been on the investor side. And it's really quite a different perspective from each side of that table. But what is the key thing that turns an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, into a successful founder? Because believe me, it doesn't come natural in a lot of ways. You may have a lot of creativity, you may have a lot of ideas, you understand the marketplace, you're seeing gaps, you're putting patterns together, but that is not going to make you a successful founder. But what is that sort of key thing that sort of makes you a successful founder? And just give a little bit of history of that. I also work a lot with the Hulk Prize, which is sponsored by the United Nations. It's a $1 million annual prize given to a lot of these startups that focus on sustainability. And it's a question that I got asked when I was talking to them just recently. I mean, how can I be a good founder? Come up with more ideas, these types of things. I'm going, no, it's being a founder is a lot different than being an entrepreneur. So what is the key thing? What makes a founder?
I guess the key thing that we've discovered is there sort of is an optimal, ideal range of one, being able to initiate. So initiation is really important to put the ideas into action. So being able to execute on the ideas. The next part of that is having enough reflection and patience to, at certain points, pause and reflect, hey, is this the best way? Should I be engaging other stakeholders? Should I be getting, advice? And so there's this range of being able to comfortably make decisions. So one of the key factors we know is making decisions at speed. So, the speed to market, the speed to that product market fit, the speed to be able to raise that next capital raise round so that you can go on that growth journey. So, and when we look at speed, it's a number of key factors around what we call internal reference. So being comfortably, being the authority, making decisions on your own, doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. But still having that optimal range of what we call external reference, which is being able to take advice, feedback, and data, whether it's from your customers, from your stakeholders, from your investors. And so there's this optimal range for founders. If you're able to kind of be in that have that awareness of that optimal range, because you're kind of too much or too little of anything can set you back. And so that's one of the keys. It's speed, and then being able to put your ideas into action, and then quickly evolving and learning from that. So, is it working, not working? Okay, how do we rapidly test, change, and then get that closer and closer to that product market fit, so that you're then ready for growth and scale.
And what is the situation with founders now? I mean, here we are in this sort of, one would say, the tail end of the pandemic, though one doesn't know where we're going in that sense. And all of a sudden, because of COVID, we've been sort of pushed into the digital transformation. We've been pushed into this conversation that a lot of people have been talking about for years. Not many have prepared themselves. And all of a sudden, here we are. I mean, what are the biggest challenges you're finding when you're mentoring and coaching with a lot of the startups that you're working with? What is the biggest challenge they're finding right now?
There's just multiple sort of myriads of challenges at all sorts of levels. So, being able to immediately have to work out a remote working policy, and then being able to identify just even in that communication or that setup, what sort of processes or procedures, especially for members in the team that get so much value out of that sort of interaction in the office, whether it's the banter and going, hey, David, can you check on this? So that's the first part, the actual physical environment and the new ways of communicating. There's been lots of studies at the moment just being inundated on Zoom calls. There's actually a key study where watching, constantly seeing faces, whether it's close up or distance, like that's activating sort of flight or, fight modes of, the psychology. And so seeing some of those things, but so that's kind of the first layer. The next few layers is a lot of leaders are not knowing how to navigate, conversations. And so if you've got global teams, so if you right now have a team in India or the Philippines or different parts of Europe where you're being in extreme periods of lockdown, and then you've got other people, like in Sydney or Singapore, where I am, where we're able to business as usual, we're able to socialize with friends, go out, so the sensitivity of, when you're framing meetings, that you're meeting everyone where they are and being aware of, exactly, that how to engage in a way so that the other leaders still feel engaged at work. And then also knowing the challenges of now, for the first time, you are now having to be a worker, a parent, and a teacher all concurrently at the same time. And so really managing the well-being of your talent and your workforce. So navigating all of those things. And then the next biggest thing is, can you replicate your business entirely, this digital transformation? Can you acquire customers digitally now? Like everything you have to now kind of quickly work out, how do we do workshops, physical workshops in a digital format? How do we, acquire our customers if we're used to going to see our distribution partners or visiting certain factories or labs of what the prototype looks like? Like, how do you do all of those things in this new way? So leaders are now kind of faced with just myriads of all those different levels of, motivating a very challenging time of their workforce, how to upskill leaders. A lot of the next level that they have is having leaders who are first-time leaders. And so a lot of the founders we see are first-time founders and first-time leaders. And so not having that experience or the language or the communication to engage at all those different levels. But that's, some of the things that we're seeing at the moment, just, people are just reacting, going, okay, we need to roll out this new strategy. We need a new hybrid plan. Like half the people in the office, half the people on the call. How do we now run this call? And so like all of these sort of new hybrid models that are actually being born in this sort of new digital era.
I was reading some research recently that was saying that the initial euphoria, the flexibility of working from home, the freedom of not, being under the eyes of your supervisors all the time, this kind of stuff, that the euphoria is fading out quickly and moving in the same direction as some would say social media is moving into. That it's becoming a bit demoralizing, having the lack of personal contact and these types of things. Plus, what's really difficult to do in a virtual sort of situation environment is handle the politics. The politics are really difficult. I mean, when you're face to face, when you go grab a coffee, when you can actually sit in a meeting and sort of hash out some disagreements, it's all nice and cozy when everybody agrees on Zoom. But how do you manage disagreements on Zoom? And especially when you're in, high risk areas, certainly on the investor side of that, where you really have to discuss things that have failed, things that are not working as good as they should be. And how do you get that, how do you experience that tension that you need sometimes to get some of these feelings across and some of the urgency, some of the priority of some of these discussion points that you need to get across? So I was reading that and I was just fascinated by this. So I'm under the impression where everyone thinks that when the pandemic is over and sort of the new normal is everybody works from home, everybody's decentralized, everybody's in the village, on the beach, in a bunker, doing that. I'm starting to think quite the opposite is going to happen, that we are actually going to move back into a very accelerating and very human sort of approach to getting back to business when it all comes down, especially in the startup scene, where founders, pressing the palm, meet and greets, coffees, moving the room, these different types of things are so important.
Yeah, totally agree with that, David, because in my years of running incubations and acceleration programs in co-working spaces, that collision of ideas and discussions that you have are a really key part of innovation and cross-collaboration. My prediction is that, co-working space is now going to be the new norm. Like, people are just going to be not having such long-term sort of assets and leases where, they're only utilizing 30% of the space. And so I feel like, co-working space is going to really come back, because people who genuinely thrive on that interaction, are so much more productive, that, you come in and you're not distracted by your home environment. And it depends on your home environment as well. I'm seeing just in really, really, really incredible burnout that's happening right now. Like this sort of new digital format that you're doing, all time zones, you're responding to Slack emails, WhatsApp messages, like every sort of, digital comms, and people not having the discipline because of being able to turn it off because you're at home, and then immediately having to do all the other responsibilities that you may have home, whether you've got kids or, so there's kind of this blurred, and people just burning out because they don't have the separation. And that was the great thing about going into a physical space. When you left that, you can kind of, close your laptop or computer and you can pick it up the next day. That this constant being on, in the studies that we've seen, people are just not able to turn off. So people are really struggling to sleep, struggling with nutrition, struggling with their, sitting on their kitchen chair and they're not properly set up, and, if they don't have a proper office. So they've got back pain, neck pain. We've certainly have people in our team who, have all sorts of like wrist issues. So all of those disciplines that, you didn't have to think about when you went into the workspace, you now have to do that for yourself. So we're seeing just crazy rates of burnout and people, and then you touched on just teams, that the way that you're communicating, getting this robust discussion on Zoom. And so one of the things that we measure inside the platform is your level of motivation for what we call affective communication, which is you want to see the reaction of the person. So I'm an example of that person. I love seeing a person who is smiling, or your body language. And so the other one that we measure is neutral communication, which is they don't need to have their cameras on. They're listening out for the specific words that are used. And so people worldwide, if you don't know exactly what that person's communication style is, you could feel like, oh my God, I'm just talking to these blank full screen, and I feel like I'm talking to myself, and I feel like I'm, getting sick of just seeing myself on the screen. And so the communication at the level it was before, it's not only you're not building that deep rapport, but you're also not being able to read each other as well. And so this, in additional, let's say if you use Slack as a communication channel, that if you're not getting that on the Zoom call, or the way that you're communicating with Slack, is you could have a lot of miscommunication that's been happening. And I've certainly seen that in lots of teams that we've been helping to navigate. So you could be really short on the Slack, or you could be reading, certain messages and going, oh my God, David, why would you say that? Or why is that all in caps? And so there's just lots of little, sort of the communication things that you now need to navigate. And so knowing if this person needs to see something, hear something, read something, or be doing something on a call is going to be useful, because otherwise you could be having the same meetings, could be repetitive, and not have that sort of traction or growth, or getting actual stuff done in this new digital format.
Well, I think so. I mean, I keep looking for that digital click. When you click with someone, and how does that happen digitally? Because when you work within a startup situation and you've got your core team put together, and core teams are so important, and sort of that repertoire of sort of unspoken words that you have with your core team, they just sort of know and they can read you and understand exactly what you were saying. And then things just happen to click when you meet a new customer, a potential customer, when you meet new staff, or ideas come in, things happen to click. And they click in the group sort of sense, right? So, and how does that happen online? I keep looking for that, and I haven't found it yet. And maybe somebody will come up with someone to solve that. But it also goes into this area of sort of, how can I say this, sort of feeling comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. And especially now when we start to look to the near future, we've got, these 6 big clusters of new technologies coming down the pipeline. We've got market dynamics that have unseen before. We've got consumer behavior really opening up. We've also got a value system introduction, impact, sustainability, green, clean. We've got this sort of entering into that whole side, and it's being driven by consumers that want to buy much more friendlier products and services, earth-friendly, people-friendly. We've seen it by investors that are shifting in that direction too. We're also seeing from the public sector, looking at certain types of legislation around creative economy, for example, recycling, these types of things. How does this all fit into what you do? I mean, has your shtick, for lack of a better word, has it changed over the last 10 years, and now it's got to change drastically again to sort of bring in all these sort of new variables in the equation?
Yeah, I think it definitely has changed in the last 10 years. Our prediction is so much of the new sort of entrepreneurs or startups is going to be around collaboration. How good are you at collaborating? And it's about communities. And so I feel like a lot of the new sort of sustainability, impact work, these are set up, lots of foundations and networks have been set up. And so if you have that natural inclination to collaborate, I think you're going to be way ahead in terms of setting up the systems of, different distribution partners, setting up whether it's, just like the whole supply chain that is actually working together. So I feel like there's something definitely around sort of deep tech innovation. There's going to be that new emergence. I just feel like, all the companies that we're seeing now, depends on how well they all kind of collaborate, that sort of entire supply chain. What we're seeing also is for those who haven't needed to naturally collaborate, if you were say a marketplace platform, you kind of have that old sort of, go-to-market strategy with the first in market, with the first, cab riding, ride sharing, app with the first this. I think a lot of it's going to change in order for it to be sustainable, and that depends on the systems that need to come together and support that change. But there is definitely something around communities, something around collaboration. We've certainly seen the fastest growth tech companies are the ones that are sharing information. So if I look at Canva again or HubSpot, they're setting up digital academies of learning. It's free information. Go and learn it. And so people can come learn and then collaborate. And they're building these huge communities of, Atlassian's another one where they've got like a marketplace of apps where you can API into all the different apps. And so I feel like the future of a lot of these tech businesses is how do you set up these marketplaces for collaboration and more people to easily plug into each other, easily being able to really understand each other's tools. I feel like that is going to be the new emergence of the new types of technologies.
Are you seeing a change in the perspective from the investor side? I mean, we've talked about, this concept of impact VC, sort of the VC model from the old Silicon Valley days is sort of broken. So you can't just throw money at a startup and expect it to do something, right? Because everyone's been through it. We've had 20 years of it now. So there's a disruption coming into that type of financing. And impact VC, obviously they're looking at positive market returns, market plus returns, but they're also looking at this concept of impact. And there's a whole, a variable gray zone of different definitions around whether it's impact first, mission first, all these different types of things. But from the investor, when investors are really talking to you about how they should be selecting founders, or how they should be not selecting, let's say evaluating, or supporting, even helping, how can they do that? Are you seeing a perspective change there?
Yeah, I'm seeing a big shift at the moment. What's really interesting is previously, there was this concept of, the more capital you have, the better your capacity and capability to buy the talent and acquire the talent and sort of grow and scale the business. And I've seen in the last few years, I know a startup where they raised 233 million and then died 18 months later. And so thinking, how is that even possible? And so what we're seeing is the big shift is a lot of the new investors are now moving towards what we call a venture building model. That how do we actually come in, understand what the gaps are? How do we help, whether we put someone in, you have a part-time CFO or a CTO that runs the operations, that hires the talent or that trains that first-time founders. We're seeing a lot of those types of venture building models that are investing, but also going on that, building the skills and capabilities, being able to hire the talent to help these sort of first-time founders, and also setting up communities of their portfolio. So one of the investors, one of the VCs in Southeast Asia known as Quest, and so they assign a portfolio company that's already been on that journey, so that's already been ahead of you. So if I was raising my seed capital, they'll assign you someone who's already raised their Series A, and then Series A they'll assign someone to Series B, so that you're just one, so that person's actually learning and getting mentoring from a founder that's just done exactly what they need to do right now in terms of focus. And so we're seeing lots of those types of VCs. And so it's been very hands-on, I've seen, as part of the due diligence process. I recently ran an investor training session on how to do due diligence using sort of data analytics. So investors are really, really keen on not now understanding that the what we call human skills or soft skills previously is a very key part of scaling themselves as leaders. So how do I lead myself? How do I lead a team? Now, how do I lead an entire organization? And so culture becomes a really big part. And so we're seeing lots of companies now who have just kind of blown up, and you see lots of, you hear lots of sort of toxic, culture horror stories. And so that's now a really key part that I think investors are now investing in. And I'm also seeing investors now investing in those types of tools and businesses that really help with the sort of behavior change, implementing behavior change.
Are you seeing the development of sort of a talent management sort of opportunity here? Because as you know, I think as most people know, talent is tough now. We're in this very transformational sort of time where a lot of people were learning a lot of old skills that really won't be that useful in the future, and not enough people are learning the new skills that will be very valuable in the future. And we've also got bit of an age divide. We've got a lot of the older generation that are really getting into entrepreneurship based on their experience, where a lot of the younger generation now is feeling competition from older entrepreneurs coming in. But are you being asked to be a bit of a talent scout for investors? That's a provocative question.
Well, I'm going to challenge you on this topic overall. I feel, I recently did a panel on cognitive diversity. And one of the things is just around talent management or talent, or the recruitment of talent. Recruitment has not changed for the last 5 decades. People are still, you put a job description, you're, interviewing for the hard skills, and based on, that sort of criteria of X number of experience or what their skills, you then go through that interview process. And so already from the get-go, because that part has not been changed, whilst people talk about, we're trying to hire on culture fit or aligned on values, the number one thing people still hiring talent is based on, your CVs and it's sort of the technical, what we call the hard skills. So around the question around the opportunity around talent is that right now, everyone's reevaluating, is this the right role for me? Do I feel that I have the biggest impact? I'm seeing so many people doing career shifts, so I feel like the opportunity right now, people have more time during COVID. They're at home thinking about what else should they be doing? If given, the state of, potentially people's health could be at risk, what is it? And so people just are reevaluating their careers. And obviously, careers are being impacted by the speed of, robotics, machine learning. So I feel like the opportunity that, the question around, are we being used for talent scout? It is, yes, the big opportunity. And what I'm so excited about is as we start to build what we call success factor models, which is we go and study the same way we study founders and successful entrepreneurs, we go and study the best engineers in the world, the best data scientists in the world, the best people and HR leaders in the world, the best salespeople in the world. And based on, that range of their motivations, we're going to be able to benchmark the same way we're doing right now with the entrepreneurs and founders that we do for investors. We're going to be able to see, hey, guess what? David has an 86% match to a data scientist. You probably can go from investing in impact to becoming a data scientist because you have this high bias and motivation for information, for numbers. And so it's going to be great to be able to now identify what are the motivations of these top sort of domain, occupations, and being able to give people, oh my God, I'll use myself as the example. I'm a civil and mechanical engineer, and I kind of fell into sales because of my love for data. I was like, well, this is easy. I just follow what the marketing data tells me, follow what the customers want. And I use the data and the same approach that I, from my civil engineering, how to use data to solve problems. Where's the evidence? We're always looking for the evidence. And that's the same way I sort of fell into sales. And then I fell into tech startups. I fell into coaching. But it's, on that same, because of my love for data. And so I think there's this great talent opportunity now. Imagine, being able to find the LinkedIn of motivations. I don't care if this, let's say, intern or this student, whether they have a, aeronautical engineering background, whether they're a, biologist, whether they're, just previously worked at Starbucks. Based on their motivations, they have the energy and the drive to be really a successful HR person. They have a natural curiosity for people. And then in addition to that, based on these CVs as part of that recruitment process, you won't know if this person's male or female, whether they're 18 or 65, whether they studied at Harvard or MIT or they didn't finish high school. So you're going to be. So I feel like when we talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, I feel like being able to, look at, wow, I put out this job ad and, what's critical for this role would be strategy, people, externally referencing others, which is, collecting data about other people, that the platform, this LinkedIn of motivations, being able to go, well, here you go. Out of all the people, we're going to ping these top 200 people, and based on your criteria, here are the 10 people that you should interview. And you won't know any of those things. So I really would love to disrupt recruitment right now because still the whole world is still having that same methodology and criteria. And I feel like that's what founders and investors, I think what the great opportunity is to have that really amazing cognitive diversity in their teams and their leaders. And so being able to, just communicate with anyone because you now have a team that's based, with all those different sort of diverse perspectives and being able to manage that versus, so a lot of the challenges we see with leaders is they're used to a certain style or a certain team. And certainly we've seen one of the biggest challenges with high growth companies as they raise more money, they hire sort of ex-corporate or enterprise leadership levels, executive levels, who then come with whatever the previous culture or the previous values, which sometimes may not be a clash or a conflict in certain leadership styles. And so, being able to now recruit based on the motivations, I feel like is going to be quite exciting. It's a quite exciting time. And now that's the new norm. Everyone's hiring and interviewing remotely. You have to trust and be able to read. Well, David said all the right things. He seems like a great guy, but then it's not until you start working with the person going, oh my God, they're not communicating. They haven't shared any information. Oh my God, they're the way that they, demand things done. So I think the more data you have, being able to just start to disrupt that sort of very initial stage of that recruitment part, I think that's the biggest exciting opportunity around talent management. And then who knows, my next career, I could be the next greatest data scientist or machine learning or conversational AI specialist. Who knows?
That's probably one of the most fascinating jobs I've ever seen. Actually, I know the young lady who was programming one of the major superstar robots, and she was actually behavioral programming. And I thought that is a cool job to do something like that. But I'm seeing another here opportunity, and maybe a bit of a help to some of the listeners. I mean, this is also disrupting. I mean, if I had a school counselor that had that ability when I was in school, that would have saved me years of struggling around trying to figure out who I am. And I see it now in university, certainly undergrad, but even at the master's level. I'm seeing that there is a lack where, I mean, is it possible that a student, third-year student, undergrad, can go to your platform and try to figure out, now that they've learned something, they've got a little bit of skills, some experience behind them, they've worked on their soft skills by working within the community of being on campus, these types of things. Can they go online and get some insight into what could be possible career paths for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Not just third-year students. You could be a first-year student. And so we've also got high schoolers using the platform as well.
Oh, really?
A great case study for us is we've partnered with the University of Technology of Sydney back in Australia, Sydney, and we worked in a program called Techcelerator, and we're working with undergrad engineering students. And we met Rowan Smith, who's a mechatronics undergrad. And his grandmother, his nan, suffered a stroke, and so he built a robotics to help stroke patients rehabilitate and work with physiotherapists. And so we were in this program, and we were just blown away how the tool was able to give useful data and insights to these undergrad students. And in fact, so he not only founded his company, he was VC backed. He's found an industry sort of co-founder. He actually this year won top 30 Australian inventors under 30.
Wow.
He's 22. And it's incredible. So, and then we have another undergrad student who was a bachelor's of medical science and a bachelor of engineering, who built a machine learning algorithm tool to be able to detect skin lesions. And so she's founded her company. And so all of these every single university has an entrepreneurship module, and they also have some sort of accelerator or incubation or some sort of program that helps, put your ideas into action. I'm in fact working in 2 weeks with, over 370 NUS National University of Singapore students to start to build that entrepreneurial muscle. So it starts with data and starts with awareness. And some of my best change work has been all students, because they haven't been preconditioned of what the world's going to be like, or what that workforce, or what that first role model of the internship or the job they're about to do. And so that they're really open to learning about themselves, learning about communication. I think the future of students is really about being, assertive, being able to, start to ask really big questions of what is it that this works or doesn't work. I mean, certainly I've seen in Asia, that's been one of the biggest gaps of not having this high level of tolerance, which is, very accepting of everything your professor says, or very accepting of, what the curriculum or the program is, and not doing enough questioning. And I feel like the biggest opportunity is like the creativity is is going to come from questioning, understanding, implementing, prototyping, and less of the person in the front who's the authority that tells you exactly what to do, that you start to, question some of the data or the feedback, because we're moving at such a rapid pace. A lot of some of the programs or the curriculums that's been around for a period of time may not be relevant by the time this student graduates. Like, in 5 years' time, if I graduate, in 4 years' time, that market may have moved. Marketing has changed. Now it's all this new digital and social media and influencers and so many things, change so rapidly. So I think being able to evolve, being able to adapt, asking critical thinking, critical questions, and really the number one thing is to build your self-confidence. And then, go after the internships that you want to. So some of my best students I really want to do an internship. This is exactly what I want to learn. I want to learn how to build product. I want to learn about AI. I want to learn about. And so being very intentional about what you want to learn, and not leaving your fate to, the professors or the curriculum or your parents who convinced you that, investment banking or becoming an accountant or becoming a lawyer is sort of that best career path. I think so many of those industries services industries are being disrupted. So, that's one thing I encourage now students. And so you don't have to be a third year student. You can be any student to jump onto the platform and just to learn about yourself and get some self-awareness.
Well, this has been a fascinating discussion, and you seem to be right in the nexus of all this sort of accelerating change. And I think that's going to be sort of the key dynamic, I think, going forward. I mean, change is inevitable. Change has always been, but the rapid pace of change and the number of things changing at the same time, I think is going to be a really challenge for a lot of founders, entrepreneurs, investors, graduates, for a lot of the community. Even as you get later on in your career and you want to do a career shift. I mean, that the multiplicity of all of that is really unbound. But it's been a great conversation. I'm getting notes that we're getting to the end of our conversation, but it's a great conversation. And I want to thank you, Annie, for coming on. And it's a fascinating role that you're playing, sort of, I don't want to call it the glue, but in the middle of all this. It's a fascinating role, and I think you're doing a great service to a lot of people, a lot of sectors of that. And I'll leave the final statement up to you before I say thank you.
Thanks, David. It's been a really awesome, as you know, I'm a bit of a people data geek, and so I love talking about this topic and talking about talent. I think the most exciting opportunity is, we're at a time where we can kind of now create the role. Like the future is you deeply understanding what your talents are and then creating that role for yourself in the world. And it's less we're trying to, fit into or mold ourselves into, I think this is such a great time because there's just so many things in the digital world that are not yet known. And so it's the new technologies being created. So, just use this time to really deeply understand what your strengths, what your talents, do you like working with people? What's the environment? Get really, really curious and then really go for it. That's the number one thing around entrepreneurs. They don't ask for permission. They may ask, they what's the saying? They don't ask for.
Yeah, I know that. I know it's better. It's better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. That's right.
That's it. Yeah. That's exactly it. So that was kind of stole my final line there. And so really just go for it. And that's the number one things when I coach female founders as well. I'm like, just go for it. You have absolutely nothing to lose. There's everything to gain. So really going for the careers and roles and experiences you want, because, at the end of the day, we may have a short period of time that we're here. And so let's maximize the impact. And so I feel very blessed to be working with so many founders who deeply care about big impact that they want to make in the world, ending poverty, giving, offering, access to clean water, some of the most basic things, or, edutech companies who, in remote communities, trying to offer different ways so that they can have access to education. And so I just feel like this is such a great time to really invest in yourself, deeply understand yourself, work with a culture and people that you love showing up to work every day. And it doesn't feel like work. So I feel like now in my 40s, I'm there. I don't feel like I'm working. I just meeting amazing people from around the world every single day. Every single day is a delight. I never know what's going, and then being able to just really support them, whether it's communication, whether it's leadership, whether it's, fundraising goals. It's just, and I feel like everyone should come into work feeling that same way. The cognitive panel, I asked a blue sky question. I moderated that panel and I said, if anything could happen, what would you like to happen in terms of HR and talent? And one of the HR directors said, it'd be great to be able to bring my full self to work, to feel safe to bring my full self. And so I feel very blessed that I feel that every day. And so my last words would, I hope you find and go for a role where you get to bring your full self to work every day. And there is no separation of your personal life or your professional life. It's just you and your talents, and you bring everything. And being able to embrace that. So thank you for inviting me to be on the Near Future podcast. Feel very, very, very honored to be spending time with you.
No, it's been a fantastic conversation. And I know for a lot of people, this is a big challenge. What am I going to do? The world is confusing. And your advice and insight at the end there, and I think you're right, man. If you could walk into any place feeling 100%, what could be better than that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's what I feel like, you have a work, it's a family. Like at the end of the day, you spend a ridiculous number of hours, you see these people more than you see your families. And so, go find your work family. Yeah.
Okay. With that, then I want to say thank you, Andy, for coming on board, and thank you to all our listeners. And we will be back soon with more tales from the near future. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, David.
Techsauce Global, sparking innovative thoughts. The Near Future Podcast in partnership with Techsauce and SDGX.